YouTube, let's see if I'm even capable of doing this. This is the first time I've ever sat down and just spoken candidly to the camera about my personal life. And really about anything in general other than sports or wrestling or golfing or dumb stuff like that. But I've been having a very weird couple of weeks, and I had a very weird and nostalgic day. So I think this is a better time than any to make a YouTube video, since I've been procrastinating on YouTube for about the last 15 years, but that's a whole different story. As you may know, or at least one or two of you out there, I started posting YouTube videos in about 2006, right when the platform dropped, right when it was starting to get big, when YouTube was a completely different place back then. I was even able to make the main page a couple times. You know, there was a 5-star rating system, like things that a bunch of kids don't even know about YouTube is how it was back then. And that's when I started posting videos. And I would use my grandparents' little camcorder that they had. I didn't have any way of editing it at all. Everything was one take, and I would put it straight on there. All of my stuff was sports related. I thought I was a sports analyst. This was my senior year in high school. And I loved it. I was passionate about sports. I followed all of the major sports. And then once I jumped into YouTube and found that community of people that were like me and loved sports and could talk about it on YouTube, it was like this whole new world of really like social media, the first beginnings or the first roots of what eventually would become social media. And for me, somebody that I've always been a little bit socially anxious and kind of had social anxiety my whole life. It was just a really easy way to meet people and just be part of a community just by, talking to a camera. You don't even have to do that. You just got to comment on someone's page. And then, I don't know. And looking back now, there was a lot of older guys and stuff that were probably creepy and I shouldn't have really been talking to, but the times were different back then. YouTube was a little less monitored and things were what they were, but there was also a lot of good people that I met, and it was just a good time. And my channel ended up getting 400 or some subscribers. I think I have like 200 of them left. But that was all about 15 years ago now, my senior year in high school. So longer ago than that. And then basically I hit my 20s and YouTube became a back burner thing for me. I didn't even think about YouTube. I didn't really watch YouTube. It wasn't a thing that really crossed my mind. What happened was after I graduated high school, I moved back to my hometown. When I was in high school, I was living with my grandparents. And when I was living with my grandparents and going to high school, I honestly didn't have very many friends. I didn't have very many social activities, and that's what kind of drove me to the YouTube world. And that's what drove me to really being super passionate and spending a lot of my time and energy on videos and trying to grow that. And in hindsight, I wish I would have never given that up, because I truly believe if I would have stayed consistent, over the past 17 years, when I started in 2006, I'd at least have a modest following, which is all I ever wanted. I didn't want to become Mr. Beast or PewDiePie or whatever his name is, like famous. I just wanted to be part of a community of people that thought like me, and it was just really exciting to me, and it was a really exciting time in history, really, that all of that was going on. And it was awesome to me to be able to even have a camera and sit down and be able to make my own content, my own video, and express my own views and put it out to the world and interact with other people and see what their views were like. But I entered my 20s and all of that went away. I just started smoking weed every day. I started drinking all the time. I tell people in my 20s I did exactly what you're not supposed to do and exactly what you're supposed to do. I partied, I drank, I smoked weed, I did drugs. I did drugs to the point where it got really bad at one point, but we'll go back to that. But I also worked full-time, constantly. I would work 5 days a week and then go to school on my 2 days off. I went to college, got my degrees, all while partying and doing all that. But eventually, it just got out of hand. I ended up in rehab when I was like 26 for opiates and painkillers because it had just gone completely out of hand, and my life had completely got out of hand at that point. And that was, at that point, rock bottom for me, and I knew I had to turn my life around. So I did, and I was sober for a long time after that. I actually came back to YouTube. I think I've privated most of the videos now, but I actually came back to YouTube for a short, maybe like 6-month period when I was back into watching wrestling again. It was kind of just like doing some wrestling content for 6 months. Again, I think I was doing it off my phone. I didn't have any money to buy like a nice camera or anything like that. And I was just kind of doing it just really to pass time because I was sober and bored and I wanted to do something. But anyway, after that, I stayed sober all the way up through COVID. And then during COVID, I still stayed sober. And by sober, I mean, I still drank and I still smoked weed here and there, but no opiates, no hard drugs, like no drugs that interfered with my life. I was a manager at a restaurant making really good money. Like everything was fine in that respect. But then COVID hit. A bunch of people at the restaurant I was working at, a lot of employees decided to take off, decided they'd rather collect unemployment money than work, which I don't blame them. And it made my job extremely difficult. So I decided to leave there and I decided to work for the city of the place that I was living at, which is always a great job. It was great benefits. It was good pay, really good security. Great paid time off, ton of sick days, everything you get for working for the government. So it was great. And I did that for about 3.5, 4 years. And then I dislocated my shoulder. Now, this wasn't the first time I dislocated my shoulder. We'd actually circle back around to the opiate thing in the first place, but one of the reasons I was even addicted to opiates in the first place was because I dislocated my shoulder when I was in my early 20s at a bar in San Diego, running down some stairs because we were getting kicked out of a bar in San Diego, and I slipped on a staircase and tried to grab the rail and ripped my shoulder out of its socket. So that was the first time it happened, and that time it hurt really bad. So don't ever dislocate your shoulder, but it gets a little less painful every time after that, so that's nice. But that was kind of when my affection for opiates started too, is when I started getting them prescribed because of my shoulder pain. But anyway, I managed to get my shoulder under control with physical therapy and working out, and I hadn't dislocated it in I think 7 years until that point when I was working for the city and I dislocated it. And all of a sudden I was like, oh shit, like what do I do? I was in pain. I didn't take any painkillers. I didn't relapse or anything, but I knew I should see a doctor. I'm older now. My job was very physical at the city. I mean, everything I did had to do with road work, so paving roads and plowing roads, and just a lot of really physical stuff, like lifting very heavy things, lifting things over my head, which is really hard to do if you have a dislocated shoulder, or rotator cuff problems like that, or like putting things at certain angles and just certain situations where I couldn't do it if my shoulder was going to keep popping out. So I had to take time off work. I had to go get an MRI. I had to get multiple x-rays. I had to see my primary doctor. I ended up going to see a specialist. Like I said, I ended up seeing an MRI, and all of this now was a year ago, exactly this time. So it was a year ago around the holidays last year that all this was happening. So on top of all of that, this whole process is moving way slower than it usually is because they're closed a bunch of the time because of Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's. And it took a month for me to get the MRI results back because all the doctors were on vacation, and again, like Christmas and all of that. And I think I left work on my last day working was October 31st. And I was trying to come back to work by December because I figured out, like, all right, my shoulder feels better. I think I could go back to work and at least do light duty, because when you work at a job like a city or something like that, they can usually find a position for you that's not your normal job, but it's a job that you can help out and you can do something, and it's not as physical, just so you could get your hours and you could come back to work and you could still be participating, but you don't hurt yourself. So I was trying to do that, but my workplace did not want to let me do that. They didn't want to let me come back until I was fully cleared to do my job, which, like I said, is very physical. So I was still waiting to get full clearance from my doctors. And before I could do that, I had to wait for results from my MRI, and I had to get approval from my specialist. So when I finally did get the results from my MRI, it was past New Year's. So by the time all this happened, from October 31st until January, whatever it was actually late January, I was just unemployed, burning through all of my own paid time off, all of my own overtime hours that I'd occurred over the last, 4 years. And instead of taking them as overtime hours and taking the money, I had saved them up in the bank to use as vacation hours. And I had to use all of those, all of my vacation hours, all of my sick hours in that time of being unemployed, because I had no other money coming in. I had no other stream of income. And it really went from being the most stable and best spot I had ever been at in my life to all of a sudden, I don't know what to do. Because I'm kind of skipping ahead a little bit. But basically what ends up happening is my doctor writes a note saying that she'll clear me for work, but she basically tells me that she shouldn't be clearing me. But because I explained to her the situation, like, I'm going to lose my job if you don't clear me, she basically understands and kind of like, and clears me. But the way she writes it on the paperwork, basically my HR administrator at work says, no, like, I'm not going to accept this. Like, it's not detailed enough. She didn't put enough information about how much weight you can carry. Basically, I'm not going to accept this. You've been out of work for too long already. Like, at this point, our only way to move forward is basically we both move on. Like, you're not getting fired. We're both just moving our own separate ways. We'll still put in, like, good word for you. And at the time, honestly, I was like, whatever. I was so over it at that point. I was really over the city more than anything, because I had been trying to go back at any capacity for months at that point to do anything. And they just refused to let me go back and made me burn all of my own money. When I'd seen people get away with stuff there that was ridiculous. And I'd always been what I thought a decent employee, and everybody else called me a decent employee. And I got promoted multiple times in the short time that I worked there, the 4 years that I worked there. So it was just baffling to me they wouldn't let me come back in any capacity to work. And then for them to just be like, yeah, well, if you're not physically capable to do your job, there's no other job here that you're qualified to do. So basically you're out. And at the time I was like, fuck it, I have my Class A license. I have 17 years work experience. This isn't going to be a problem. Like, my grandparents own 2 houses down in LA County, down in like the South Bay. Palos Verdes, nice part of LA County. Like, I'll be fine. So the first 3 or 4 months of unemployment, I didn't even look for a job. I went golfing 3 or 4 times a week. I lived on my savings and I lived on my severance pay. I basically just took a 3 or 4 month long vacation and just did whatever I want. I felt pissed off at the world. I felt that I had been wronged. There was also a lot of personal stuff going on in my life at this time. That was also part of the reason why I moved out of the city I was in back down to where my grandparents lived down in LA, because I had a big falling out with somebody that was really like my brother and my roommate at the time, and really came to light, found out the person that he really was at this time. And we'd known each other since we were 4 years old, and we just had a huge blowing up and still haven't talked to each other. I don't know if we'll ever talk to him again, honestly. And I don't know if I really ever will want to talk to him again. Like, just the things that were said. And that's a whole nother story. Not something I want to get into. But anyway, it almost put me in a place where I was ready to move on with my life. I was ready to completely cut ties with Big Bear. That's where I came from. Cut ties with that entire chapter, where I was from, with all the people from there. And I was going to start over a new life down here. So not immediately, after my 4-month vacation, and once I got down here, I got settled in. I moved into my great-grandparents' house, which, mind you, hasn't been lived in since 2010. So we're talking 15 years this house hasn't been lived in, and it really hasn't been kept up on, or, really, there hasn't been any new appliances or furniture. Everything in here is pretty much from like the 80s or the 90s at best. There's still stuff like from the 70s hanging around. When I came in, there was a bunch of cobwebs we had to clear out. And I'm not complaining. It was a free place to live. And this house is worth $2 million because it's on a it's on a quarter acre of property in one of the nicest parts of LA. So it's like, I'm not going to complain, but I spent the first couple weeks doing that, clearing this place out, fixing some of the plumbing issues and the other issues that go along with like this place. It's still on a septic tank. Like, that's how old the house is. Once we got all that figured out, I got settled in, got my bed in here, and I started away on filling out job applications and doing it online. And this was different for me. This is the last time I really had to look for a job and really had to go out and like search was when I was 18 years old. Every other time I basically walked from one job into another job based off of references and, people who had liked me and had pulled me from one job to the other job with offering me more money. And this was the first time I was in a situation where I had to go and throw out my resume and put myself out there and try to find the best job I could. And so that's what I did. So I was online trying to do that, trying to find my way through it with Indeed and LinkedIn and all these other things that I really wasn't privy to, that I really hadn't been a part of that world before. So I just jumped into it and I tried to do it, and I was applying to city jobs and jobs that were relevant to things that I was doing, you know, driving jobs, things to do with my Class A license, operating jobs, and I just wasn't getting any answers back at all. No emails, no calls, nothing. So then I tried Craigslist, applying for the same stuff, same thing, no calls back, nothing at all. So I give up on that. And then finally, I'm like, you know, I just have to get some type of job. I have to start making like some type of money, and I'm bored out of my mind. So I end up getting a job at a golf course. You know, I love golf, so I figured this would be the perfect time. That didn't really work out at all. You know, they were really looking for like a... All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm back. And as you can tell, I cut that video short. I basically went on rambling about my life for like another 10 minutes, which is something that I don't think anybody would find interesting. And something that, after thinking about it, I really didn't want to put all that information out on the internet, at least not right now. If somebody requests a full lifetime story from me, maybe I'll think about doing it later, but right now I don't think anybody's interested in it, and I'm honestly not very interested in doing it. So the main purpose of that video was just to explain that there's obviously going to be different content on my channel. I'm not just going to focus on golf. I'm going to focus on politics, modern events, really anything I want to. I put up a shrine for Christmas, even though there's only 6 days until Christmas. So I'm going to try to film one video every day until Christmas to get the most out of it. But basically, I'm doing better. I have a job now as a head manager of a retirement home restaurant. It's a restaurant that actually is at the retirement home, and I'm going to be the floor manager, which will be nice. The money's decent, not bad, and I have plenty of years, 10, 12 years in restaurant experience. So I'm excited and I'm happy about it, and it's a job I feel that, I don't want to sound like a prick, but I feel like I'm worthy of, not like Target somewhere else just spinning my wheels. So I basically just wanted to jump on and tell you guys that, and that I was getting a little too emotional and serious in my last video. It's really not that emotional and serious. I'm just going to work on being healthier and being a better person in 2026, because 2025 just wasn't the year. And that's pretty much it, guys. Merry Christmas.